This recording is of the breakout session covering measuring and reporting student outcomes in a standards-based system. It is one of the 3 breakout sessions that took place during Eastland's State of the Schools event held on November 9th, 2017. The first part of the presentation is going to cover how proficiency is measured, including the different grading scales and the types of assessments that are used to create a standards-based grade. We're going to start the presentation with a quote from Thomas Jefferson, and then hopefully after the presentation is over, you'll have a new appreciation for Jefferson's sentiment. Jefferson stated, "There is nothing more unequal than to treat unequals equally." You are probably familiar with the traditional grading scale at Eastland, or at least one very similar. It is most likely the scale upon which you are measured, or the one that you use to measure the students you teach. And if you have students at Eastland schools, it's the scale upon which your children are currently measured. But even though the traditional grading scales may be what you're familiar with, they even differ between the grades. You see, what is considered C level work at one grade level would earn you a B or even a D at a different grade level. Also, the grade that is reported, more often than not, includes non-academic indicators such as effort, behavior, participation, tidiness, or even extra credit for writing your name on a math paper or bringing in a box of Kleenex during cold season. And in a traditional grading system, these non-academic indicators are usually treated equally with the actual standards of skills for the course. And when we treat these non-academic indicators equally, this can lead to students receiving a subject matter grade that's not close to an accurate reflection of their mastery of the course skills and standards. So Eastland's moving to a standards-based grading system that's going to allow us to more accurately report to parents and students the students' level of proficiency against course and grade level standards and skills. We're going to talk about how we generate that standards-based grade. In a standards-based grading system, you have formative and summative assessments. Now, an assessment doesn't mean that it's going to be a traditional test. An assessment is any activity such as oral presentation, a couple of sentences about finding the theme in a paragraph, exit ticket, just an interview with a teacher, any type of activity that is used to inform the learning that occurs during the learning process. So the formative assessments could be a quiz, but they also could be a whole host of other things. And in a standards-based grading system, there's going to be a whole lot of formative assessments. And these formative assessments are used to help both the student and the teacher and even the parents know where a student currently resides on the path to mastery of specific skills or standards. Formative assessments are also activities that are used as practice to reinforce skills or standards so students maintain the level of proficiency or mastery, and they don't experience a drop-off in performance as the course or the year progresses. And though formative assessments are going to show in a grade book, they don't actually count towards the end of the course grade. They're in there simply for informative purposes so that the student and the parents and the teachers can see where a student is at that point. Formative assessments are oftentimes accompanied by a lot of feedback. Now, a summative assessment, again, this assessment or activity can be a traditional test, but just like a formative, it can be a lot of different things. It could be a presentation, it could be a paper. It's going to be any type of activity that's used to measure proficiency on a grade level skill or standard or a course skill or standard. So in a facts class, it may be baking a pie, or in welding, it could be how accurately you were able to, or how strong the weld is between 2 pieces of metal. And there are going to be several summative assessments on standards and skills throughout the year. There's going to be far less than there are formative assessments. And these are the assessments that actually determine a student's end of course grade. In a standards-based grading system, we're going to move to a 4-point scale. So 1, 2, 3, 4, which is going to be different than the traditional A, B, C, D, F, which you've become accustomed. Also, there's no direct correlation between, say, a B and a 3 or a C and a 2. They don't mean the exact same thing. So parents and students are going to have to get used to seeing 1 through 4s rather than A, B, C, Ds, and Fs. And a 1 meaning that there's no evidence. The student's unable to demonstrate any level of proficiency in grade or course level standards or skills, even with significant teacher support. Emerging, which is a 2, means that the student's been able to demonstrate some of the proficiencies of those course or grade level skills with teacher support. And a proficient means that the student has demonstrated the proficiency of the skills without support. And mastered means that they're able to actually demonstrate mastery of those complex targeted knowledge of grade level skills. And on the next slide, we're going to show you what maybe that 1, 2, 3, and 4 would mean against a math standard. So on this slide, we talk about the standard, I can multiply multi-digit numbers, and we have what a 1, 2, 3, or 4 would mean against that standard. So no evidence could mean that the student can multiply single-digit numbers, but even with supports from the teacher, doesn't know how to approach multiplying multi-digit numbers. A 2 would mean that they can multiply a single-digit number against multi-digit numbers, and with support, they can begin to multiply multi-digit numbers. And then proficient, that 3 means they can multiply multi-digit numbers. So if you have a worksheet out there with multi-digit number problems, they can complete that worksheet. And then the mastery level would mean that they can not only complete that worksheet, but if you put out like a story problem, they'd be able to pull out the multi-digit numbers from that story problem, create the equation, and then solve that equation, which is a completely different level of mastery than just being able to solve a problem that's explicitly set out for them. So in a standards-based grading system, the grade is pure. It's purely based upon what the student has demonstrated, and it's limited to measuring the performance on that course or grade level standard of skill. On this slide, we have a picture of a cup of water. And if I set out a cup of water in front of you that's clear as the glass and another cup of water that has a nice orange tint, you're instinctively going to reach for the cup of water without any additives. And that's what we want from our grade. We want our grade to be pure without any of the additives, unlike the traditional system where those non-academic indicators are included. Also, in a standards-based grade, the grades are not an average. They're actually based upon trends or tendencies, with that last demonstration of learning having the most weight. This way, those sins of the learning in September aren't averaged in with those proficiencies and masteries of the subject matter, the standards and the skills that they're going to have developed in May at the end of the school year. So this slide shows what standards-based grade trend line can look like. So if you see, we'll say this is 5th grade math, and when the student enters 5th grade math, at the beginning of the year, they're demonstrating a 1 in proficiency. And that's okay, because we don't expect students to have mastered 5th grade math at the beginning. We hope that they have mastered it by the time that they exit 5th grade. So at the beginning of the year, this student has a 1, and they continually progress towards mastery level throughout the year. And at the last demonstration of learning, they have a 3.5. And this student's grade is going to be a 3.5 because they've consistently progressed towards mastery, and their last demonstration of learning is a 3.5. See, in the traditional system, we would average all this together and come up with a grade, but that's not really an accurate level or accurate representation of this student's level of mastery. The same also works, though, if a student is unable to carry that mastery forward. So just like in the last slide, we're going to look at the current trend for the student's grade. So at one point, this student was able to reach a 2.5 level of mastery, but they weren't able to maintain that level of proficiency. You can see the student slid back down to 1.5, and then at the end of the course, that's what they still demonstrated as their level of mastery was a 1.5. So the 1.5 is going to be that student's grade, even though they were able to hit a higher level at one point. So to give you an example, 30 years ago when I was in high school, I was easily able to run a mile in under 6 minutes. But at my age now, I can't even come close to running a 6-minute mile. So I don't get to call myself a 6-minute miler just because 30 years ago I could run a 6-minute mile. We also don't believe that students should only learn just math, reading, science in school. We believe that there are other areas that are important to learn, those soft skills. And at Eastland, We're calling those indicators of academic success, and they're based upon the Eastland Way. And the Eastland Way is based upon 3 R's, which are respect, responsibility, and readiness. So the students are respectful of their classmates, their teachers, the school property, and others' belongings. The students demonstrate responsibility by completing all their assigned work thoroughly and independently. In other words, they don't cheat on their work. The students demonstrate readiness by coming to class prepared to learn with materials in hand and are active participants for the entire class period. And just like with the rubric we showed for the math standard, we have a rubric for indicators of academic success. So this way we can make sure that we are accurately reporting to the parents and the students how your student is falling in these indicators of academic success. We want to make it as objective as possible and try to take out as much subjectivity as possible. So we'll look at the respect indicator of academic success. And if you look, a 4 would state that the student interacts respectfully, the student listens when others are speaking, they show respect for school property and others' belongings, and they encourage others to do the same. The proficient level of that is the same thing, only they don't take a leadership role in encouraging others to do the same thing. The emerging level would mean that they sometimes do these things, but not always. And then a 1 or no evidence means more often than not, they don't interact respectfully. How is this going to look when we report it out? Well, our goal is to give you a 1-page report that's very similar to the traditional report card. This is going to be the first page of your student's progress report. And this page is going to list all the students' current classes, and then their current level proficiency in that course. One of the big differences between a standard-based report and a traditional report card is that every quarter is simply a progress report meant to inform you and your students on their progression towards mastery on those course or grade level standards and skills. Another thing that students and parents are going to have to get used to is that at the beginning of the year, there's going to be a lot of 1s and 2s. And that's okay, because we don't expect students to have mastered the end of course standards at the beginning of a course. That does not mean that your student is failing. It just means that they haven't mastered the course standards yet. After page 1, we are going to provide you a detailed report. And on that detailed report, it's going to list the standards broken down by domain. And those domains are going to have paragraphs that are going to describe what that student's learning under that domain. And then those are going to give you scores so you can get a better idea of where your student is doing, not just in English, but where they're doing in the breakdown of the English language arts. So possibly they have some strengths and weaknesses, and we're able to identify what those weaknesses are and target those weaknesses. So a domain is really just the heading under which individual standards or skills fall, and it's how we just group those standards or skills that are similar or they build off one another. This next page shows another example of a standards detail report, but just for the math and science domains. And notice we also are going to include those indicators of academic success for the courses directly under the report card. They just don't influence the subject matter grade. In the standards-based grading system, Eastland has determined that to grant credit or promotion, any student that receives a 2.5 or above will get that credit or promotion. As a district, we felt that this was the level we chose because it meant that basically the student was performing at proficient at half or more of the standards and emerging at the other half. And this was going to be enough to grant credit or promotion to the next grade. But that doesn't mean that the student earning a 2.5 is not going to need additional supports at the next grade or possibly need to come in for summer school to get those other standards to the proficiency level, because that means they still show deficiencies on about half the standards, and they're going to need to get those up as the skills are and standards are articulated throughout the grades, and they're going to build upon each other. At the high school, we're going to continue to report GPA just like we have in the past. The difference is that we used to take a number, we would convert that number to a letter, then we would take that letter and we would convert it back to a number on a 4-point scale. But now that grades are generated simply on a 4-point scale, that's not going to require a conversion. So if a student earns a 4 in a course, they simply get a 4 towards the GPA. Valedictorian, salutatorian will also remain intact, and that designation will still be based upon the top 2 GPAs in the class. The top 10% is going to stay, and that's going to stay because Eastland graduates that are in the top 10% get an automatic full ride for the first year at Highland Community College. For the high school, the transcript is going to look slightly different than it did in the past, because rather than having A, B, C, D, and F, it's going to have these 4, 3, 2s, and 1s. And there are many parents that are concerned that this won't translate well to colleges, but actually schools across the United States grade in a host of different manners. And one of the things that we send with a transcript is a school profile that explains what our grading system means. And so colleges use that school profile along with the transcript and students' standardized scores and a whole host of other things to determine college admissions. So thank you for taking the time to watch this video. And if you still have questions after watching this video and the other breakout session videos, please feel free to email us at sbg@eastland308.com.